Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of From the Marginlands. I am Aarti Kumar Rao.
Hi, and I'm Prem Panicker. Aarti, just as we were prepping for this episode and trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about specifically, I was thinking of the fact that two things, right? One was in the concluding part of the last episode, you were talking about what you were reading, and that was the state of the, both of us were reading it actually, the State of the Environment Report 2025. And you said that there was one chapter specifically that caught your attention, and that is a chapter on heat.
Mhm.
And again, I think in the second episode of From the Marginlands, we discussed a related issue, which is what kind of coverage is there in the media about climate change, environment, and related issues. For various reasons, the two things came together in my head right now because we are going through an extreme spell of heat.
Mhm.
If you remember, 2023 was rated the hottest year on record ever since records started being maintained. But now the projections are that 2025 is going to be way ahead of 2023. All of that said, I feel it on the ground, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But the thing is, I don't see that sense of urgency anywhere in the media. Am I not seeing something, or do you feel the same way?
Um, Short answer, I feel the same way. But if you look at the media, even a cursory glance at media, it's the classic report on the symptoms and nothing of the cause. Or you
Mhm.
never really follow it back or find a way to treat the real cause and not just treat the symptoms. Yes, so I just did a cursory check of our mainstream media newspapers, and let me see if I can share my screen here. And here we go. You're going to be seeing a little bit of meta stuff. And now, um, all right. So here's how the Hindu plays out, where again, it is a lot of data, or rather articles about the heat wave itself. So there is a heat wave. There is some scientific reporting from the Lancet, which there was some a while ago, where it urges response to the heat wave exposure, etc. But mainly, it is about the fact that what the temperatures are in different places across India. Times
Right.
of India also had similar reporting. Chhattisgarh, what each of these places are doing because of the heat wave and the fact that there is a heat wave. It's all straight
Mhm.
from the IMD, so you're not getting anything different in any of these. It's all the same kind of stuff. And then if you look at coverage in terms of what cities and states are doing, it seems again very reactionary. 3,000 water coolers, early warning system, how Delhi plans to tame the heat. They're going to warn, but what are people going to do, right?
Right.
There are people whose professions and whose income depends upon things where they are working in heat, and we'll go into that a little bit, and how that contributes to our GDP and so on. And in The
Mhm.
Wire, for example, there is a little bit more. Climate change may have played a big role in North India's April heat wave, which is the one that has just gone by. And they talk a little bit about how it might be influenced by climate change. And again, that's about it. The point I think that several people are making, and the down to earth state of India's environment did make uh, again, and I'll stop screen sharing first. Let's do that. Um, yeah, I'm back, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the point that the State of India's Environment 2025 made in its extensive heat related section was that there is no concerted heat action plan. which is forward thinking as well as deep, and not very reductionist or simplistic in its form. And
Mm.
a few cities and places have heat action plans, but look at the amount of India that's going to be affected by heat. Look at the states, right? Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, huge states, Uttar Pradesh, Eastern Uttar Pradesh,
Right.
Jharkhand, Odisha, Karnataka, Maharashtra, big states. And, what is the concerted heat action plan for these places going forward? And there isn't, or at least there doesn't seem to be one, it's not reported in the mainstream as to what it really is going to be and how effective something like that might be. So there
Mm.
is a huge lacuna in terms of your planning forward for something that is so, it's right here. It's not even something in the future. What do you think when you see all these headlines, Prem?
See, there are a couple of things. One is I was looking at this climate risk index report
Mm,
2025. One of the things that jumped out at me is that the report says that in India there have been over 80,000 deaths and an estimated 180 billion in economic losses from extreme weather events. This report spans the period 1993 to 2022. Uh, what is noticeable about it is that the report ends in 2022. And if you remember, 2023 was the
mm.
hottest year recorded ever. So this does not even account for that. And now the projections are that 2025 is going to exceed 2023 figures, which basically means that we're now heading into the hottest year ever in recorded history of the earth, right? What I don't understand is how was 80,000 deaths, 180 billion in losses, in economic losses. Why is this not a national emergency? Why is this not on the front page all the time? That's the first thing that struck me about the coverage.
Can I interrupt you there? Forget it not
Yeah,
being a national emergency. It isn't even considered a disaster. Heat waves are not even
correct,
notified as disasters, and therefore it's not eligible for the NDRF at all. So
correct.
there's that as well.
Yeah, and you notice that it's just some states that are declaring it a disaster. For instance, Tamil Nadu has declared it a state-specific disaster. It's not.
Telangana too.
Telangana as well, yeah. But these are not state specific disasters because there are no state specific answers. I mean, you can do mitigation measures, like, for instance, in Kerala, there is a rule that people are not allowed to work. That is, the people who are exposed to the elements are not allowed to work from about 10 o'clock in the morning till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is to avoid their being exposed to this kind of heat. But these are all localized measures, and what is missing is what is the overall way. You showed me that thing, right? The 3,000 coolers in Delhi. I don't know how effective that's going to be. But overall, I was looking at media coverage, and the first thing that strikes me is it is about, like you said, it's about numbers that really mean nothing unless you provide a context. Uh, and you discuss the implications of these numbers. The second is there is a tendency towards the sensational versus the uh, substantive. For instance, I mean, I still can't get over the story that I remember reading. I think it was in India Today last year. The story said something about cooking an omelette on a hot pavement. Somebody actually did that,
Yeah.
right? Looks great. Oh wow, look at that heat. You can actually cook an omelette or you can boil water or whatever it is. But it doesn't really, the problem with trivializing something like this, or the problem with focusing only on these kind of sensational stories, is that the larger implications are completely bypassed.
Yeah.
Right, so that is one of the things that I noticed, and the related thing is that the almost total lack of scientific substance in the reporting on heat waves and what the consequences can be. The
You know,
second is. Mhm.
hmm, sorry, I'm
No,
just going to
carry on.
interrupt you there on that cooking an omelette on the pavement. It just kind of triggered something which brings again to the fore how we tend to look at things piecemeal and we're not looking across silos. And I'll tell you what I
Right.
mean. When you talk about cooking something on the pavement and it'll look an egg boiled or whatever, what is the
Hmm.
pavement? It's tarmac, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to our cities, look at what we're doing to our cities. We're paving everything over, right? And
Right.
the tarmac gets far hotter than the air around or under a tree or whatever, right? The tarmac is just super hot. It could reach
Hmm.
60 degrees, 100 degrees, like in this case, or whatever, right? Celsius. And now, and then, so what are those implications for even urban planning, right? If you're going to keep putting more and more tarmac on the ground, you're going to keep increasing. So, yeah, it might be fun to say, oh, I boiled an egg or whatever on the pavement, but really, what are we trying to say here? It means that tarmac gets super hot, right? And
Correct.
going forward, we need to think about such things in context of what are we doing in cities. We don't seem to be making those connections of, you put more tarmac, you pave more things, you pave your own. This in Kerala, it's happening in Bangalore also. A lot of our compounds are paved compound wall to
Hmm.
compound wall, right?
Yeah.
And so it's everything is radiated heat, and that's going to increase the heat as well. Forget, yes,
Hmm.
there's climate change and all of that, but even just this is not particularly suited to cooling your immediate microclimates. Anyway, go ahead. This was a small rant.
No, it is a rant that is apropos because I was also some time back I was reading this report by what is it, the Sustainable Futures Collaborative,
Yes.
right?
Navroz Subhash
And
and others.
correct. And that report noted that Indian cities are dangerously unprepared, and dangerously unprepared in quotes, for intensifying heat waves.
Yep.
Um, that is again a point that I miss out. And in a related, uh, you know, note, one of the things that I noticed about the coverage in mainstream media is that much of it focuses on urban centers,
Yeah.
city-specific issues, right?
Mm.
But the rural impact, for instance, the heat stress on arguably somewhere between 65 to 75% of India's workforce. Uh, I remember there was a projection of 34 million job losses by 2030 due to heat related productivity decline.
Yeah.
This is not just underreported, it is missing from the
Yeah.
public discourse. It goes to the point that you were making earlier about this not being seen as a disaster. Firstly, it has to be seen as a disaster in order to have nation specific plans,
Yeah.
government proposals, action plans, etc. All of that is missing. And while it's not, it, the fact that the media hasn't reported it doesn't mean that the government doesn't have to do something about it.
Exactly.
But we know that in order to push the government into doing something, it requires public sentiment as well. And public sentiment is driven by media.
Correct.
And that is where I'm coming from when I asked that question originally about what do you see in the media in terms of reporting. It is the media doing enough to make us aware of the dangers that we are running right now as we speak? Without that knowledge, without that sense of what is going on, we're not going to get worked up enough to demand that something be done about
Correct. And I think contextualizing the danger as well. Just simply saying heat wave or simply saying 48 degrees or 47.5 degrees Celsius or whatever, what does that really mean? And you mentioned the rural workforce.
it. Hmm.
There's the other, I'll take the opposite tack where there are so many workers who work indoors, but those, I mean, it can get pretty hot inside a room. We all
Correct.
know that. They're
Yeah.
working in close proximity to machines which radiate heat as well. They're working in crazy conditions, um, which again, microclimates within a building could get so hot. What are the plans for buildings like that? What are plans for business owners? What plans? I mean, it's a whole slew. And you mentioned 34 million full-time jobs, which India is projected to lose, which is in the next 5 years, which is 2030.
Mhm.
And 2030 is not so far away. Earlier,
No,
2030 used to be very far away, and now it's 5 years away. And that those 34 million jobs, full-time jobs, actually contributes to, it's about 50% of India's GDP, which is contributed by workers in heat exposed conditions. Imagine that, 50% of our GDP. We tout our GDP and all of that, but here's something that is staring us in the face, among many other things, staring us in the face about what could hurt our GDP, but we seem to be doing precious little about it.
correct. And you brought up that thing about, even indoor workers being affected, and you were talking about machines and the heat that they radiate. A couple of weeks ago, I remember editing a piece for India Spin, which we had published, and I'll link to that in the show notes. Uh, this piece was not about heavy machinery work. This was about women who, during their downtimes, while the husband is away at work and they've finished the domestic chores for the morning or whatever, they do things like rolling BDs or
Yeah.
sewing clothes and all of those, and they have to do it inside their homes, which are basically asbestos covered buildings.
Tin sheets.
And
Yeah.
yeah, tin sheets. And we saw that, for instance, when we went on that field trip sometime back.
Yes. Road trip. Yeah.
Everywhere we saw, yeah, women sitting
Hmm.
and rolling BDs. How are they doing it in this weather? Uh, so there was that story as well. So all of these, the problem is that this is like that whole blind man and the elephant story that you keep sometimes referring to when you talk about the environment, right? We're touching little points of stress, but there is no attempt to frame it in that larger context to show the whole before you start looking into the specifics. And I
Yes,
think in that sense is why the media's lack of informed coverage is doing everybody a disservice. Why do
I
you
agree.
think we don't cover the environment and such issues in depth anyway?
I don't think it's, again, it comes down to making connections, right? I don't think people are connecting. It's the question when we were talking about should we do this podcast. The one of the questions we had to ourselves was, what is environment, right?
Right.
And we wanted to do a whole episode on what is environment, because for most people, environment is other.
Yeah.
Environment is something that's an obstacle. And I think the fact that it is all around us, and it affects everything we do, and everything we do affects it, is not front and center. It goes back to my favorite Aldo Leopold quote. We assume industry supports us, forgetting what supports industry, which
Industry.
is the environment, which is the land, which is the earth. And I think that connection being lost, and maybe also because the mainstream media is so city centric, or is done by city slickers, and we're not. I mean, how many of us can even answer the question, where does oxygen that we breathe really come from? Everybody will say
Mm.
lungs of the forest, lungs of the world are the forests, or the or Amazon or something. And I can bet many people are thinking that too. And our guest today is going to debunk that, and in a beautiful way. But later, that's for later. But I think that's why, Prem, long answer, short answer to that is that we do not have the wherewithal to make those connections. And it comes back to what we read, what we're fed, and we're fed symptoms. How can you make connections if you don't walk things back to how we got where we are?
Correct. And to that, the one thing I would add is, and this is my pet peeve, you've heard me talk about it ad nauseum, but I'll do that again. In order to cover these big subjects, if you're talking environment, climate change, if you're talking health, if you're talking, you need specialized reporters. You need people whose only preoccupation is studying what is going on in that particular field and then making these connections that you keep talking about. In order to make connections, that has to be my primary focus. And that has to be, I mean, a certain part of every day needs to be devoted to this one subject. And this is something that the media no longer has the will or the resources to facilitate. The
Can
media
I
doesn't
take an
seem to.
opposite tack there?
Mhm.
I would say that we do not need specialized reporters. We need every reporter to talk to each other to see the connections, maybe collaborate to tell the story. So the health guy talks to the industry guy, talks to the economics guy, talks to the water person, talks to whatever the beats may be. But you need to talk to see these are all connected. Everything
Yeah,
is connected, and until and unless each one of us despecializes to make those connections and start seeing those connections, I feel we'll still again be in silos.
right. But you're not actually taking the opposite tack. You are expanding on the tack that I was taking. My point being that you need somebody who's looking into water issues. You need somebody who's looking into health issues. You need somebody who's looking into climate change issues. And yes, step two to that is they can't operate in their individual silos. They need to talk to one another in order to make these larger connections that you're talking about. So we're pretty
Mm,
much coming from the same place, and therefore the need for resources multiplies, right? It's not just
mm.
one person looking at one beat, it is multiple people looking at all these important beats, making these connections, coming together, creating comprehensive coverage, none of which the media today has time and space for. And why that is so is probably a question for maybe another day, another debate, whatever. But the reason why I brought up heat right in the beginning, Aarti, is that right now it's kind of personal. As you know, I just came back from a trip. I went to Cochin, I went to Trivandrum. Trivandrum was Cochin. I didn't spend long enough to really feel it, but Trivandrum was stifling. It was the weather readout said 33 degrees and feels like 42. And that app wasn't kidding. It really felt like 42 with the
And you
humidity.
know why? That's called humid heat. And
Correct.
that is so important. Nobody is talking about it.
Yes.
Chennai, Trivandrum, Bombay, all these places are going to feel that humid heat, which will add 7.5 degrees Celsius to whatever the readout is.
Exactly. And the humidity at that point in Trivandrum was 78%. It's coastal, right? So you have that whole light bulb temperature effect. The upshot of all that was, though we spent about 3.5, 4 days in Trivandrum, a lot of it was outside. And you're suddenly coming from a controlled climate like, air conditioned hotel rooms, etc., and suddenly finding yourself out in this heat. We all felt it. And this was a family function, so pretty much everybody was there. But here's the upshot. 5 days later, I contract a virus,
Mm.
which knocked me out, and I'm still kind of recovering. I'm not 100% recovered. In the adjoining room, my wife Raji is sleeping off. I mean, she's got fever, cold, body pain, all of that. She's on meds and she's sleeping. My brother-in-law is down with the virus. My sister-in-law is in the early stages of catching it. She started showing the symptoms. My niece, elder niece, is down with that virus, and my niece's 8-year-old baby is down with that virus. And all of I mean, the entire family just got knocked out. This feels anecdotal, but we're not the only ones. You keep hearing about this. I
No,
mean,
no, no. You're not
right?
the only ones. May I just jump in there? Last year,
Hmm.
in this gated community that we live in, which has, 24 hours electricity, water supply, everything, we're supposed to be completely, like, top of the pops, whatever. Um, so many people came down with an unknown viral. It was not
Hmm.
chikungunya. It was not, none of the tests yielded anything. An unknown viral which brought them down for 6 months because the post viral arthralgia, they couldn't move.
Hmm.
There were people who could do 100 push ups a day who couldn't get up from their seat.
Oh.
It was that debilitating. And these are not people who are whiners. These are strong people who are, up and ready to go and things like that. And nobody to date has been able to tell what viral that was. And unfortunately, whatever the whatever little microbe brought down my mom less than a month ago
Hmm.
galloped in 5 days to affect her, full bloodstream, and she was gone, right? Because it was
Yeah.
septicemia and then various other things that affected the heart. What was it? You tend to think high fever, I'll take Tylenol, I'll sleep it off, or whatever. I'll take Crocin, I'll sleep it off. But some of these things are so potent right now. We're not quite prepared for something like this. And in 2009, Mama had another of these afflictions, which went on for a month at that time, still with no diagnosis. None of the known tests came out positive. So no bacterium, not no viral test came out positive. So yeah, you're right. I don't. We might be talking about anecdotes here, and this may be anecdata, as Huberman puts it, but um, maybe somebody needs to do some kind of a study to see what's going on here.
Yeah, and because you brought up Tylenol, this is a bit of a non sequitur, but it might be important for listeners to understand this. Earlier, you used to get fever, and then you have a Dolo, or you have a, whatever, one of those prescription, off the counter drugs, and a couple of days later it subsides, right? The last time I got this viral, which was about 2 years ago, coincidentally, again, as the aftermath of a family function that took me to Kerala, etc., in peak summer. Uh, I got this viral while I was still in my sister's place. My brother-in-law, who used to run pharmacies, he owned a series of pharmacies, which he then gave up. But he's a qualified pharmacist. Uh, Told me, no, don't just take Dolo. You need antibiotics, and he gave me antibiotics. It didn't help. I just kept. There was absolutely no reduction in the symptoms. Right. Then I came back here and I went to Apollo, met a specialist. That guy looked at the medicine I was taking and said, "Do you understand one thing? Not all viruses respond to all medicines equally. What you have is not a virus that responds to what you have been given. So, anytime you're feeling this off the counter medicine or half baked knowledge about what you're supposed to take can actually cause more harm than good." It knocked me out for about the better part of 3 weeks. I think you remember that period. Uh, and it is only after the prescription was changed and the virus was identified and the prescription was changed that I started getting better. And one of the things that the doctor said at that point actually stuck with me also in context of what happened with your mom. That he said taking the wrong medicine can sometimes be more dangerous than taking no medicine at all. So don't do this. Google is
Now, my
not a
mom didn't
doctor.
take any medicine because what is conventional wisdom? If it's a viral, you
Yeah,
wait 3 days until the damn thing subsides.
correct.
But in 5 days, she was gone. It had gone too crazy beyond. I mean, God knows what it was.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
all of this is almost the perfect setup for the guests that you've invited onto the show. Today, you want to talk about him?
Yes. So we have Pranay Lal, and I'm going to give a rather unconventional introduction to this amazing guy. Hello, Pranay Lal. Pranay Lal is a biochemist by training, and he likes to say that he doesn't go to the lab anymore. He also has run a public health NGO and has been I think he still is a caricaturist. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And animator and several other hats that he wears. He writes amazing books. His first book, Indica, A Deep Natural History of India. Is that how it's? Yeah,
Indian
that's how
Yeah.
subcontinent.
it's the Indian subcontinent. It won a bunch of awards, including the Tata Lit Live Award in 2016 for the best nonfiction debut book. And if anybody has not read it yet, please pick it up quickly because it's going to go out of print. And I hope that's going to change, Pranay.
Well, I hope so
But
too. I
that is,
mean, yeah, it means quite.
yeah.
It doesn't bode well for the publishing world. So
Absolutely, or for us, or for knowledge, or for anything. But here's how I would introduce Pranay. He is the kind of guy who, before his breakfast, reads 30 research papers every day, spanning disciplines from hydrology to climatology to geology to immunology to you name itology. And he will be reading those every day, 30 of them before breakfast. And then you can just imagine the kind of information that is in that brain. And if you ever are on a quiz contest, you want him in your corner. Welcome, Pranay. Thank you for indulging us on From the Marginlands.
Thank you so much, Aarti. Thank you so much, Prem, for having me. This is a really generous introduction. So thank you so much for
Oh, no,
having me.
no, no. It's all true, as I discovered firsthand at the Salon Lit Fest. We just had such a ball. We couldn't stop talking because the man is a story a minute. And hopefully this podcast is going to prove that as well.
Thank you.
Prem?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking Indica. When I started working with Aarti and, her preoccupation with the environment, with all things related, climate change, all of that. And there were times when I realized that I frantically needed to backfill my knowledge base to just understand what she's talking about. And I'm talking about casual conversations that we're having. I'm not talking about the actual work part. And I needed a go-to book. And that is when I went back to Indica, and it's what keeps me more or less on the same planet as her when we sort of discuss these things. So yeah,
And every
thanks for
time I
that.
reread it, I discover new things. So
Yeah,
that's just a mine, absolute gold mine.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's great. So Pranay, we could go any amount of directions with chatting with you. But on this episode, we've kind of been concentrating on the specter of heat
Okay.
and how heat has been, and how this world is warming up, basically. Given that we are in the peak of summer in India, we're all baking, roasting, boiling, cooking, depending upon where we are. And I thought we'd just kick this off by, your take on what the implications of a warming world are. And I know this is a huge question, but if you would like to even look at it from the point of view of your invisible empire, that would be great.
I think I'm going to start with Indica and say that this has not been the warmest that the Earth's been. It's been, of course, when Earth formed, it was really, really hot. There was no life. Started to cool, and took about 200 250 million years for it to cool to come to current temperatures. But then it warmed again. So it warmed. In fact, the time when trees colonized the Earth, the era of Carboniferous, the time when the Laurasian continents, Americas and Russia and Europe got all their coal, that period called the Carboniferous, the period of carbon, right? That was extremely warm, but it also had, it was a freak moment because it was warm, but it was also quite rich in oxygen. So it was kind of a contradictory period. So there is an inverse relationship between carbon dioxide and oxygen. So what happens is if you have more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it warms, but if you have more oxygen, it tends to cool, right? But this is a contradictory period because you have very large trees and you also have very, very large insects. And large insects proliferate where in conditions where you have very large amounts of oxygen in the atmosphere. So Earth has, always been in very different moods. I mean, it can have a lot of oxygen and still stay warm, right? And so there have been several such peaks. What's different in the current moment is that there are several things that are happening. One, the behavior of the Earth itself, the planet. Now, if you recall, I mean, I'm going to take you back into human history and not too further back into time, say 1400s, 1500s. That was the time when we had a period called the Little Ice Age, right? And there was a small moment in Earth's history from about 1280 to 1300 to about 1820, 1830. Those 600 years is a period called the Little Ice Age. Now, three things happened at that time. The Earth started to wobble on its axis and as it went around the sun, right? Now, that wobble means that the northern hemisphere moved a little away from the sun. So it's tended to cool a little. The second thing that happened was that the sun was not having its eruptions, what are called the sunspots. The sun was actually at its lowest in terms of emitting its radiation. And the third thing that happened was on Earth, which has got nothing to do with the sun or the Earth's movement around the sun, was that the volcanoes were not firing, and the volcanoes is I mean, sorry, the volcanoes were firing. It was not a period of lull in Earth's history. Now, when volcanoes fire, especially the ones that are powerful ones, what they do is they emit a lot of uh, ash and dust. Now, our imagination is that if a volcano is erupting, it's going to spew out lava. It's going to get hot. Well, that's true, but it's a very localized event. If it happens, if the flow is happening around an island or say in the middle of the ocean or wherever it is, that place is going to boil. That's for sure. But the dust that goes up, and if it goes really high up in the troposphere, that's the place where the sun's light gets reflected, right? Now, if you recall the time when we had that unpronounceable name of the Icelandic volcano, right? The winter that we had that year was quite a cold one, right?
Mm.
And so we have, an absence of volcanoes that are throwing out, powerful volcanoes that should be throwing out a lot of dust into the atmosphere. What's happening is the other way around, is that human activity is releasing dust which is staying low. It's on the 2 kilometer height, which is the one that's trapping the heat. It's not letting the heat that the sun is sending down to escape back. Now that's a problem. So as a result, you have places like Paris or London or Boston, which are getting heat island effects, which are kind of unheard of. You had them in San Antonio, or you had them in Albuquerque, in New Mexico, or in Naples, of course, or Malta or Valencia. These places are well known for having heat island effects or concentrated heat island complexes, as I call. Now, the term heat island effect is something that we should kind of not talk about, because it's actually not the right term. It in the next 4 or 5 years it will change, because there are a couple of things that are wrong with it, um, because we are on the topic of air and dust. The heat trapping effect is the one that needs to be looked at, right? So we are looking at not just the heat coming in, but also the escape of heat, right? So we have an interplay of air pollution, the particulate air component of the air, the dust that envelopes the atmosphere, whether it's in the local region or the entire country or the entire continent. And with increased number of forest fires, these heat island effects are going to actually increase. If the fires happen, say, in, God forbid, say in say, Sri Lanka or in some large swathe of forest of South India, and if they were to come northwards or the other way around, these are going to start creating, heat island effects. I mean, I'll give you an example of a heat island effect where or heat island complex. I mean, I like that term more. There's a place called Kyul, which is near Dehri on Son in Bihar. Now, this is a
Mm.
place where all the smuggling of coal happens. Coal comes from 3 or 4 very large mining areas. People get their coal, or ek truck ka do truck banta hai, that kind of stuff. People who want to pilfer a lot of coal, they do that, or they want to take out the anthracite, they do that. Now, there's a lot of dust there. There's a lot of coal dust. So during the day, if you really want to survive in these places, you're a driver or you ride a motorcycle, you have to keep your headlights on, because it's so dark, it's so polluted, it's so dusty. So it's like darkness at noon kind of a situation. Actually, you have the smog on your face 24/7. Right now, there's several such pockets across India. I mean, I can name you. There's a place called Purghazi, which is near in Western UP, which has this problem that in that city we don't have a problem with coal dust, but it's electrical waste, electronic waste. So people are using crude methods to recycle electronic waste, and you've got this dust, which is metal dust. That's all around, right? Now
Right.
that city is very, very hot because of that. It's just enveloped in this metallic sheen, you know. So I think we've got several such cities. There's a city in called Atul in Gujarat, which has a huge number of uh, small and medium scale enterprises. Most of them are illegal. They produce gases which are very complicated. Heavy gases used as substitute for refrigerants and air conditioning reasons. For those kind of conditions, they are very heavy and they stay down on the ground. Right. So they produce a lot of ozone. Ozone is not a good thing for your lungs, and it also causes trapping of heat. So I could go on this, right? So I think we need to be very clear about when we talk about heat. I think it is a evolving thing. We don't understand heat. Heat is going to be a very, very important aspect in the climate change debate in the future. I think we've been very tardy in our response. We don't know how to address it. We know that the east coast of India has always been subjected to it. I mean, Bhubaneswar, Puri, Cuttack, this belt, Vijayawada, Vizag, Rajmundry. If you come to that belt in the summers, because of the humidity and the buildup of the
Mm,
humid sea wind, the breeze that
mm,
just brings in the moisture but does not move, and there's the
Mhm.
sun that beats down with very little albedo effect. That means there are no clouds that are reflecting back the sunlight. So the radiative effect, that means of the trapping, is huge. And I think these are going to now start expanding into middle of Odisha, further into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and Tamil Nadu. I think it's an area that we have to prepare for. I'm sorry, I forget what the question was. I just went into another, you know. Uh,
no, no.
So
So let's take it from there. Anyways, uh, I guess question is yes. Okay, so there are these pockets. There are probably large pockets, small pockets. Heat is rising for various different reasons. I guess my question, and I'll throw it open to Prem as well, and you can answer both questions. Then my question will be: so what?
yeah, and if you add to that, I mean, one of the points that you make is that there are more microbiomes than cells in our body. Uh, does rising global temperatures or heat stress affect that balance of viruses inside of us? And potentially, what are the impacts, good, bad, indifferent?
right. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I can't
Okay.
imagine what would happen to the the ecosystems of organisms that live in soils, waters, within animals, and within us. It's going to be
Hmm.
um, changing drastically for a couple of reasons. I think the soil moisture and water availability to humans is going to change significantly. So I think that's going to affect the way we eat, we consume food, and the type of food we consume. Right? A
Hmm.
lot of foods that are extremely water intensive will become very expensive. They will be grown hydroponically, for example, in the near and short term. It's already been happening. I think lots of countries are doing that. I think in countries like India, we'll have to adapt very quickly. I think that was Aarti's question. What is it that we should be doing in terms of? I think we've got a huge crisis in terms of town planning. I think the heat
Mm,
industrial heat uh, problem is largely in the design of the way we design our colonies, our homes, and the not just the material but the way we orient our cities. They're not designed in the way that with the sun and the winds and the elements and the interplay of those. We don't look at that at all. I mean, for us, we're kind of fixated with the idea that you for climate change, let's use trees to absorb all the carbon dioxide. It's a very good, simple solution, but it doesn't work. the same thing is being pushed for heat island effect. Why don't we cover our our roofs and our chats and our chajjas and our balconies and our porches and everything with shrubs, trees, lianas, creepers, whatever we can find. It's not going to work. Yeah, it will help you reduce it, but it's not going to reduce the entire city's um, heat island effect. I mean, for example, in cities like Barcelona, or Cordoba, which have very good you know design of apartments with balconies with very nice bougainvilleas and other plumerias and other plants of those sizes, and they're lush, but they still have those restrictions of timing that then they're going to ask people to come into office very early and leave by early noon, or come later in the afternoon and work till early evening. So those kind of and they're going to reduce the working hours and those kind of things, so that those kind of adaptations will need to be made, but they're not working clearly, because even for those cities in which you are, I mean, it's still Mediterranean climate, but not as harsh as tropical conditions that we have. Design alone is not going to work, right? Because
Hmm.
the duration of the heat is going to be longer. The other challenge that's going to happen is the way the monsoon is going to change. But I think that let's park that for later. And I think there's some brilliant people who can talk about it. I mean, I can recommend for this podcast somebody called Roxy Call, who's at
Roxy Cole.
IIT, and
Yeah.
yeah, he's a brilliant
Yes.
speaker, and I think he understands the
Yes.
monsoon better than anyone today. I think you have to invite him because he's absolutely
Yes. In fact, I want him to talk about the history of monsoon and how it's
yeah,
changed and how it's all of that. So, yes,
right.
Roxy's on our list for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
fabulous. Yeah. So
Mm.
coming back to Prem's question about how, so there are two aspects to it. One, the organism within and the organism outside. How is it going to change the behavior of the organism outside? I had the audacity of saying in my book Invisible Empire that mpox is going to happen, and and
Yes.
a lot of people um, you know, uh, Siddhartha Mukherjee, Venki Ramakrishnan, Larry Brilliant, the people who gave me blurbs and said, a lot of them said that, are you sure you want to write this? Because, we are not sure, and we can't say this. I said, listen, there is a absence in the niche, and, mpox hasn't happened for the last 9 years or 11 years. It's waiting to happen. I mean, all those conditions that make it just right for the mpox to arrive are there. And and as they say, Kali Zaban wala, so I actually said this and it happened. But I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that, hey, listen, I was right. It's not that thing. But the fact is that we are leaving niches that are empty. We don't have surveillance in place. And with the current problems in the global order in terms of investments in surveillance, especially in public health, or the lack of it, actually, the lack of surveillance, is the one that's going to create even greater problems. What we had in, say, malaria was doubling up to look at dengue, chikungunya, even tick-borne fevers in India and globally, right? Now we have very little investment in those vector-borne diseases, right? And we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Africa, South America, even America by itself is in trouble, right? But I wouldn't know what to say about India because it's so opaque just now. The conditions. I mean, we really don't know what the investments are clearly in many countries, and I would say that for India as well. We don't know how much goes into the malaria eradication program. How much should be actually be is needed to look at the link between climate change and localized climate change and emergence of disease. Uh, we've seen Nipah making a comeback into India. We've had 3 episodes in the last 7 years in Kerala. Uh,
Kerala.
yeah, actually not so difficult to address it if we have good surveillance system. We just have to look at that populations.
So,
Right. So
question, just jumping off of that, Pranay, is why is it that all three cases, why is it that Nipah always shows up in Kerala?
um,
Or is it that their surveillance is better and therefore they're catching it? And it is there in other places too. So we're just not catching it.
so the first time it happened in India was not in Kerala. It was in West
Hmm.
Bengal, right?
Okay, so either one of those tapping places, right, where they're tapping, is that why
No, not
where they're
really.
tapping the
I mean,
palm?
Nipa comes from Malaysia, right? So
Hmm.
it comes from a family which is, found right across the entire belt of the tropical world. So I mean, a lot of
Okay.
people initially thought that Nipah, Hendra, all these viruses are found in East Asia, and so that's how they were naming it. There was this whole bias about, right from the days of smallpox and the plague and other things that the West wanted to categorize and name and give certain countries or certain regions a certain kind of a shade of I mean color them in such certain way. But that's not right. I mean, I think you have Nipah and their cousins found in just about every bat family. So you have just about the viral family that from where they originate are found in just about every bat family, in every bat species. So I mean that's not new. I mean it's very well
Hmm.
known. Now the
Hmm.
thing is that was Nipah only there in Malaysia or southern Malaysia and it's got migrated into Thailand and then to Bangladesh and into India and then to Kerala, or has it always been there? My sense is
Hmm.
it's always been there, right?
Hmm.
I mean, for example, Hanta viruses are named after the river Hanta discovered during the Korean War. But the Hanta viruses are the ones that actually killed Mozart, right? And
Kill what? Sorry?
killed the musician Wolfgang Amadeus
Mozart.
Mozart. He died because of a
Mozart. Okay.
yeah.
No, sorry, you just kind of froze for a second and I
Oh,
couldn't
sorry, no.
catch the name.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
Mozart died of a hantavirus, right?
Hmm.
And now we know. I mean, Gene Hackman and his wife succumbed to a
Yeah.
hantavirus-like
Hanta.
picture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think this whole idea of viruses not, I mean, being restricted to a certain locality and not being present elsewhere. They're emerging now, even in the Americas, in just about every country that you can think of. I don't think it's a very locally restricted crisis. It is going to be omnipresent, and I think it's going to create several new dimensions which we don't understand, and several new
Mm.
varieties are going to come. See the Gene Hackman. I mean, people are calling it the Gene Hackman. I was looking at the Reddit thread a couple of days ago. I mean, I don't know why they're calling it the Gene Hackman virus, because it's clearly a sin nombre, which is it's a town in Mexico after which it was named. But we know sin nombre is found in several other countries. I mean, the exact same strain. So and it's held in the lungs and the guts of many other uh, reservoirs and vectors. So why is it that we need to look at it in such a uh, in such a narrow way? I think we need to start looking at disease and emergence of disease in a new fresh of from a fresh perspective. It's not going to help us.
Both you and Aarti have, in your own ways, written about the probably unimagined, unintended consequences of what you call provoking nature. You've written about how that can lead to, say, unimagined and that's a quote, unimagined and irreversible consequences. You talk about the various viruses that are the result of such provocations, right? And taking off from what you just said, we're talking of climate and climate driven changes to the environment, uh, coupled with provocations such as, for instance, deforestation, melting permafrost, um, altered migration patterns. Does all of this create new opportunities for viruses to jump between species or to even re-emerge from ancient reservoirs?
Yeah, that's an interesting proposition, Prem. Um, you know, I have a slightly different take on this. Creatures that have got extinct and have died out, and because of the permafrost, you know, melting, and these the carcasses of these creatures, the soft tissue of these creatures are going to come out, and
Mm-hmm.
like the mammoths, or the direwolf, or whoever, I mean, all these large mammals that lived in the permafrost of the tundras, or the tigers, or wherever. Um, what is perhaps missing is, I mean, it's already infested in a host, right? What it does not
Mm-hmm.
have is the host pushing it out. If it is something that is, say, a lung, or something that is airborne, so it has to be exhaled out, right?
Right.
And it has to come out in a way that, it's got to be persistent. It's got to find a person who has the immune suppression to allow that virus, which is currently incapacitated, to actually uh, get embedded within a host to cause disease. I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
long shot, but we know for a fact that the most common viral diseases are the ones that jumped multiple times, right? Um, I mean, we saw SARS-CoV-2, right? I mean, it jumped
Mm-hmm.
into lions and minks and so many other uh, animals, and I think it's now going to become like influenza. It's now going to start coming out from them, because now you have multiple uh, sources of having these repositories of new types of viruses, or new strains of SARS-CoV-2, whether they speciate or don't speciate, but they will create new varieties. Now, some of them will be lethal. A very, very small fraction will eventually be lethal. A very large majority will be sublethal or non-lethal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a wait and watch kind of a thing, right? So it's just like influenza. We get 2 or 3 new strains of influenza each year. A couple of them
Mm-hmm.
are very, very, nasty. I mean, for human terms, it doesn't harm the birds at all or whatever. I mean, it does in some cases, but not always. But we need to look at it from a perspective whether we are able to keep a tab on these viruses as they evolve. So until 3 years ago, we were very confident about the influenza, right? The evolution
Mm-hmm.
of influenza, because what would happen is different WHO collaborating centers would go and look at wild birds and animals and collect their droppings and their feathers or the dead birds and start looking for which is the dominant strain that is coming out, and if this is going to cross over into humans. Is this a plausible event? And if it's going to cross over into humans, is it going to cause any infection? So those kind of things are going to. But with permafrost or with climate change, related things, I mean, you are going to see some creatures that are going to start coming out in large numbers. A lot of creatures like locusts, for example. I mean, locusts love
Mm-hmm.
humidity. So India's had, since the 1780s, 5 very large locust episodes. Now, it's not recorded in Indian
Right.
history, right? We don't remember them, right? So incidentally, it's called patanga. I mean, the genus name is called patanga, which is the name for
Mm-hmm.
anything that flies an insect. Right now, that's what it's called. Patang, as in, yeah, as in the kite. Now, so there are two very large migratory locusts that affect India. One comes right from Kenya, Uganda, crosses into Saudi Arabia, and comes right to central India. There's one that comes from around Maharashtra, from the arid regions of Maharashtra. Both these are going to increase in number. I mean, these attacks are going to perhaps increase in number. That's what the FAO and the models currently say. Because the period, you remember when I was talking to you about the Little Ice Age, as soon as it
Yeah.
started to end, that's the period when it started to blow out. So we had a major collapse of crops in the Bombay presidency in 1810s, when there were 3 years of repeated locust infestations. So there was a famine. And the famine was caused not by bad British policies or any of that. It was because the locusts came and ate it. There was one freak rain that happened. That's what they want, or slight uh, normal than usual humidity, which kind of gets them to rise from the ground. So locusts breed in ground, right? They breed in they lay their eggs in
On the ground.
you know parched land, and as soon as there's a little bit of water, they come out, and they time their arrival based on germination of a particular grass. And so it's very, very well calibrated. So it's it's a metabolism of minerals and monsoons and microbes and all these guys working together to come out and feast on millets and rice or whatever's germinating at the time. They love grasses, and once the grasses get over, they go and strip the entire forest, right? That's it. But feasting on the locusts are the small mammals and other creatures and the bats. So it's not completely a, a vile and a evil situation where there's one creature completely dominating. Eventually they will end up dying, and for several years they will be in senescence, and they will only rise when the conditions just prompt them to come up and multiply once more, and then wait for the time again. So I think those kind of things will happen in great frequency. We're going to see emergence of, say, some new fevers. I mean, we've already started seeing that from the 70s, dengue, and late 80s, chikungunya, unknown fevers at one time, but suddenly they've come back. I don't imagine things like filaria coming, not because we've got very good health systems or we've got good medicines. It's because the vector is going to get completely, to my understanding, will be completely dislodged by another mosquito, and that mosquito is going to be the one that's going to get the the dengues, chikungunya, and many others actually. So that's what we have to kind of keep a because, and water is going to get scarce. So that's where dengue loves to breed and proliferate. So, and that's why Anopheles is going to perhaps get dislodged and only move to places where you have very dense forests and shallow waters and those kind of things. So I think, given the water and the heat and the changing ecology, all of them coming together, this is going to be a completely different world.
So, Pranay, given this, which is like a very, to my mind, scary scenario because of what I see as, and what you mentioned also, as a lack of surveillance, a lack of planning ahead, and what kind of medicines would work against these potentially new viruses, and what does the future of this disease control look like, given our lack of funding, lack of surveillance scenarios? Because those things, unless those things change drastically, um, we're going to be stuck with the viruses.
So I
Lack
think
of
we are stuck
research.
with the viruses anyways. So sorry, Prem.
No, I
Sorry.
said add lack of researchers to the points that Aarti was making about
Yeah, yeah.
funding and all the rest.
So I think we live with viruses, and I think we should not wish them away, right? If you
Correct,
keep
correct.
your
Not those, right, right.
yeah, not those. So even the ones that are emerging and emerging quickly, right? So surveillance as soon as you get to know, and what do you need to do after that, right? I mean, I think that's one. I think common sense is somehow suspends itself as soon as a pandemic or an epidemic or an outbreak happens. The first thing that happens is heavy-handedness and boorish bureaucratic stuff that sets in. I think there is no protocol even today, right? Even within the medical world, the first line of defense is that in the fever season is give quinine, and I think that's fine. I mean, quinine is a very good medicine. Chloroquine is fine as far as you don't react to it. It's a great first line of defense, but we don't have the great diagnostic systems. We haven't evolved. See, before we start cursing that we've got antibiotic resistance rising and we don't have great antibiotics in our pipeline, I think a bigger problem is we don't have great diagnostics, right? And I think actually we do have great diagnostics. The problem is we've not been able to bring down the costs. Now, there are those conventional diagnostics that we have, which should be available everywhere, but they're not. And I think there's a cutting edge technology that has emerged, which is called whole genome sequencing, which is in very large numbers. It's available. People doing genetic research know about it. So it takes a very short time for you to actually not just uh, know the entire population, what is called abundance, as in terms of the total population structure, but also the kind of microbes that inhabit a certain organism or the organ of a organism which you are interested in, whether you're looking at the lung or you're looking at the gut, you can find that out. What is, I mean, what we've been focusing so far is only on the genetic nature. And I think if that is leveraged for using what are the disease organisms that are happening. So, for example, you have all these circulating viruses. We commonly say that, I've got a viral. Such an easy thing to say, but which virus and why are we not diagnosing it? Right? So, if you had something like this in, say, New Zealand or in a good state in America, the first thing they would do is, listen, we're going to take a sample and see if this is something unique. Right? Because, and see, the thing is, unless it is a virus that we know, say if it's a retrovirus, like we know it's in case of HIV, we know that there are 3 or 4 very good antivirals that we can give you to actually reduce the population, right?
Right.
So that's what is called like a broad spectrum antiviral, right? But there is no need to go into that direction. I don't think, I would not panic so much for finding the right medicine, because it's going to take a long time. Because if you have a novel virus, it's going to take, there's going to be a latency period before you discover the cure. But hey, why do we let a virus emerge? Or even if it emerges, how soon can we smother it? How quickly can we, through ecological principles, reduce its spread? And that's
For
where
example?
I think tick-borne fevers. I mean, as soon as you get
Mm.
tick-borne fevers, it's caused by a tick. It's spread by a deer or a monkey, or those kind of things. Just find out which monkeys are behaving, are looking lethargic, X, Y, Z. Can you give them fruit that is laced with antibiotics or whatever, whatever?
So
That's
you're
it.
saying kill the reservoir, go to the reservoir and
Not kill the pathogen in the reservoir. I'm not saying kill the
kill the
reservoir.
right. Sorry,
Right. So
yes,
it's
not
like,
the animal itself. Yes,
not
yes, got
the,
it.
yeah, I mean, see, Casno
Yeah.
forest disease is now pretty simple to cure.
Yes,
You just don't have to kill the
yes,
monkey, right? You can either
correct.
find the tick, but finding individual ticks in the soil or in the embedded within roots and
Grasses and stuff.
yeah, in the
Yeah,
grasses and stuff, it is very
yeah,
difficult to find them, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
going to be ridiculous finding them. It's easier
correct.
to find a sick monkey, cure it. That's it. You'll bring down the burden of disease, and I think that's true for everything, right? I
But
mean,
that requires a serious level, some seriousness in your surveillance. It needs a forward thinking. It needs a well planned, uh, what should I say? Almost like I hate to say war footing, but that level of planning where you're saying, okay, hey, I need to be able to look out for these things. So I'm going to plan and all, and it's not just hospitals. It's not, you're not going to find these monkeys in hospitals. So,
oh no.
it's much wider than that.
See, I think there's something called the One Health approach, which is, I think, it's a
Yes.
great idea, but it's doomed to fail. Now that's because, at
Mm.
least for the Indian conditions, and I'm going to restrict myself to India. Now think about it. You are sitting in a district, let's say a district in Orissa or Bengal or Jharkhand, wherever, right, where the IS officer is the Maibap. He's still the zamindar. He's like the bee's knees, right? I mean, nobody can touch him. He doesn't care who his his chief medical officer is, and he would certainly never know who the veterinary officer is, right? Now,
Right.
under One Health, you're supposed to have these joint meetings in which the veterinary person, the people who look at animal diseases. Now, animal diseases could be for livestock and domesticated animals versus wild animals. So you could have
Yeah.
the wildlife
Yeah.
warden and the national park veterinarian and the livestock veterinarian talking to the health guy, right? To the chief medical officer. Now, the chief medical officer thinks that the veterinarian is, not there. I mean, they have this pecking order. A cardiologist would not talk to an internal medicine guy. An internal medicine guy will certainly not talk to a microbiologist. They have this. There's a caste system even in the sciences,
Hmm. Mm.
and this is what the bureaucrats don't understand. This is what the policymakers don't understand. This is what the scientists don't understand. So while we have a good model in a One Health approach, we've not been able to crack how to create committees where we are going to have serious conversation. I think apart from Kerala, I don't see any, and I think it's out of duress that Kerala does it because they've got Nipah and many other problems, right? But I think no other state's been able to do it. I mean, Punjab attempts to do it, Himachal wants to do it, others are failing, and they're failing spectacularly. The good thing is, so far we've not had a fever coming out of a dead carcass from, say, a wild animal or a, I mean, the lumpy disease of cattle that happened thankfully doesn't cross into humans and didn't thankfully also did not cross into other animals, but it could, right? I mean, a disease like that. I mean, buffalo pox is an example of that, right?
Right.
It's like an Ebola, right? It is very fierce. The good thing about it is self-extinguishing. It just kills itself. It doesn't give the patient that it has infected to infect others because it kills so
Mm,
quickly. It's like
mm,
typically what's like Marburg or Ebola, just like that. So it just kills you so quickly. So that's the good thing about buffalo pox. But we have not
mm,
been able to figure out what do we do with buffalo pox. We know it starts from somewhere in central Maharashtra and southern Gujarat in that belt, but we've not been able to crack it, or Chandipura for that matter. Again starts from central Maharashtra. You know, but again, we've not been able to do anything. Not
So
nothing good.
you're saying that the One Health approach has been failing because of hubris?
Of hubris, and I think this whole pecking order that we have in the bureaucratic system and our non-willingness to sit down and talk and exchange notes and admit that we've got a crisis on our hand. I mean, think about it. When was the last time a commission was set up to find out about uh, fevers of unknown origin? So, Anil Agarwal and Sunita Narayan, when I joined the CSC in 1999, in 2000, Anil Agarwal, a wonderful, wonderful man, said that, Pranay, this is my favorite thing. If you can write a story on this, I'll be really kicked. So he set me out, and, you travel to all corners of the country, read papers, Dehati papers, vernacular press. They are the only ones who will write about it. 10 kids have died there, or 50 kids are ill because of something which they don't know, right? Now, the whole system is designed in such a way that you're not supposed to communicate. You don't let information like this escape from the district to the state, or from the state to the center, because public health is a state subject. If you show
Mm,
the center that you are incapable of handling an environmental or a public health crisis of this nature, it doesn't bode well, right?
mm,
And they don't want a central team to fly in and, using the home ministry's power to come down, invoking the Epidemics Act on you. They don't want that, right? So they will not report it, and they will make sure that, no journalist is writing about it, or the local press is not writing about it. But even then, you have some stringer who writes about it, gets it published in the neighboring district, or the district 5 districts away, that, in this gaon this is happening. Right. And that's how we chased that story. We collected, I think, about 400 such examples from India over the one decade, from 1990 to 2000. We found so many such examples that there were fevers of unknown origin which never got reported. So there are fevers all around us, and we don't do anything about it. And so getting these veterinarians and getting these public health epidemiologists to come together and talk about it is 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 next to impossible. It's just such a challenge.
wow, Prem's silos everywhere. We were talking about that earlier in
Yep.
this program as well.
Yeah,
Hmm.
we were talking about silos. We were also talking about unknown fevers because, yeah, both of us have experience of that. So uh, there was that. And also Kerala, because I know some of the people who are involved in that. And I think the one breakthrough moment they had was when they realized that information traveling up the pipeline to the top, there were too many roadblocks. And so one of the first things that they did, and this was Shailaja teachers' period, one of the first things they did was empower the local district collector to form his own teams to supervise that area in terms of health. Information bubbles up, but the brief given to these district collectors was you don't have to wait for information to get all the way to the health minister and the instruction to flow back. Do what is commonsensical, do it now, and let the information take its own time to travel up and down the chain. And I think that made a fundamental difference. More than more than Nipah, I think it made a difference in the way they treated COVID, which is when this kind of caught my attention. That it was localized, and it goes to what you were talking about, right? Bringing various stakeholders together and making sure that they're all part of the conversation and that all their inputs are important. So, yeah.
You have a follow on, Prem?
No, carry on.
Okay. I just wanted to lighten this a little bit because Pranay's books are always so full of amazingness stories that I just wanted to give him a chance to just kind of talk about a few of these and also looking ahead to the amazing work that he's doing. So the first thing, both Prem and I love language. And I just wanted you to tell us about the etymology of the word virus, which I found so interesting in your book.
Yeah, it's actually etymology is very close to my heart. So all my books have the, if I find a word which is interesting and I think you need to understand, before I come to virus, I'm going to tell you about a word that I don't like, which the way it
This
is
is what I
used.
love about Pranay, because you ask him a question and there'll be 4 stories, not one. I love it. It's awesome. Please carry on.
The word bug, and people say, oh, you're bugging me. Or this bug is so beautiful, So the word bug is a very derogatory term, right? And the word bug and buggery are pretty related, right? And the word bug comes from or buggery comes from the river Volga. And it comes from Bulgaria. That's because the Bulgarians were thought to be, they would always travel in hordes, when they were 14, 15, 16 years old. To counter the Mongolian attacks, the Mongolian hordes, they would group and they would be hired by the Visigoths and the Goths and the others, the Volga dwellers, right? And they were like thought to be, because they lived together as men, So there was this whole thing about them being, practicing buggery, right? And that's how the word buggery and bug comes, right? So I don't like the word bug. So when a scientist says, this is a beautiful bug, and I can name you 100 scientists, and science communicators and science writers who use this word, and I don't like it at all. And you don't call a beetle, a butterfly, a caterpillar, a millipede, anything for that matter, a bug, because it serves its
Thank you
purpose.
for this.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I
So,
don't. Yeah. So coming to virus now,
no,
the
wait 1 minute. Before that, since you said you don't like the word bug, there are a bunch of these kinds of metaphors that I have pet peeves about, and I have a whole lecture on it. And to that lecture, I'm going to add bug now, and I will credit you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Zarur.
by the way,
Continue.
I'm the primary recipient of these lectures, by the way,
Really? How
because
so?
in conversation I just say, this is owlish or this is
Or
whatever.
he-
I
or
use, yeah,
he's such an ass, and I'm
yeah,
like, asses
exactly.
are so cute and good and
Oh, no.
intelligent, and I've walked with one for 500 kilometers. So don't you
Oh,
say
yeah.
anything against an ass.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
So
Completely agree. Completely agree on that. Right. So,
all right, back to viruses.
yeah.
Yep.
So, virus actually, if you come to the root of it, it comes to the Sanskrit term vish. You know, and vish is, as you know, poison, right? So, but the cognate of that term is actually not a negative connotation when it went to the Latin sphere. It turned into a positive thing, right? And it turned into something that can actually give birth to something. So it became the cognate of sperm, right? So it actually is something that is life giving. So from India, it went, or from the subcontinent, when it went from vish, something that is toxic or something that can actually kill you, the cognate and the evolution of the term in the Latin way was something that can give life, right? So now the virus is both, right? It can get a life of its own outside the body, and it is toxic, right? So that's why the word virus is incredible in that sense. So when I started to consult, I actually spent an entire day trying to understand the etymology of it. It wasn't a simple dictionary, so I love the website dictionary. It's quite nice. But if you go dig deeper and you start looking at the backstories, it's really fascinating. I've got another interesting story, but I'll leave it tantalizing close to you, for you to think about it. And it's the word masala. Where did it come from?
Hmm.
It's a
Okay, we've got
fascinating kahani.
homework to do.
Yeah, it's a fascinating kahani, yeah. And it took me again about four four or 5 days and two interviews with experts in University of Salamanca. Somebody who understands Arabic, the history of Arabic,
Oh,
and they said the origin of masala is very, very strange. It's got nothing to do with India. And so I was like blown away when I heard about it. And like this guy is the
Salamanca has got masala in it, strangely.
yeah, anagrammatically, yes. It's got an extra N and a C. That's right. But
See
other
in
than
it.
that, yeah.
That's great. No. I want to keep with this. I know you've said this to me personally, but I know you've also said it in other places where you've been interviewed, Pranay, where you say that equating viruses with disease, death, badness does it a disservice. Both bacteria and viruses, any microbes for that matter. And you tell us these lovely stories of how a virus makes things beautiful. Can you tell us one story about that?
I've got, that's my entire book actually. I'm so
I know,
fascinated
I
by
know.
viruses. And I wish I was living in a different time where people were, there was less of social media and there was just the radio, right? Or even the TV was just there. So that was the time when everybody was reading, right? And, and I've already got this request from several people that, hey, are you writing a sequel to your virus book? Because, I'm sure you've got many other stories. For example, I wrote a story on the history of mucus, you know,
hmm.
and and I mean, one of the stories that I did not chapo in the book, I didn't publish it because my guru, Pradeep Krishan, said that hey Pranay, you don't need to do this one. It's a good story, but don't add it here. But I mean, I just go quickly through a list of services that viruses do. I mean, one of course is that the flipper from the flipper, the evolution of the flipper to the hand that came, or the limb that got the creature from water to land was a viral infection. And from there, the development of the limb is because of a series of viral infections, right? The same thing is with the placenta. The mammalian placenta is actually a viral gene, right? So that
Mm.
whole fascinating story of why some people are not able to conceive and others are able to conceive is a viral story. That's uh, because it's a viral gene, the human immune system, the woman's human immune system, thinks that the placenta that's developing is actually a viral
Alien.
protein,
Yeah,
and so it attacks it. And so therefore
attacks it.
those women do not have uh, a stable pregnancy. So we need to curb the immune system for those 9 months before they can conceive fully, right? Now this is a story that my gynecology friends did not know, and I thought I have to write this because as a virologist or a biochemist, I knew this story. But it was a tragedy that our medical fraternity is not taught this story, or they're not even told about this, right? And I think there's several such stories. I think the human defense system, the whole, we are now fighting the cervical cancer through a vaccine, which is a very good thing. But the cervical vaccine causing virus is actually a very protective virus, and it is found naturally in everyone's body. It's only when it starts to emerge. It's like shingles, right? So it only causes disease once there's certain conditions in the body that elicit its response. Otherwise, in most people, it does not even awaken, right? It
Right.
does is stay in the body fluids, and just protects you from other viral infections, right? I think uh, I in my book I talk about how Elizabeth Taylor was saved from a very nasty infection that was caused by her cat during the shooting of the film Cleopatra, or how a star from the silent era called Tom Mix, who had a peritoneal effusion caused by a bacterial disease that you know even before the virus was seen under the electron microscope, they had isolated a virus that could attack this bacteria and cure Tom Mix from his infectious problem. And of course, all the beauty in flowers. I mean, you look at peonies or tulips or roses, variegated roses, anything that is streaked or has this very nice perfumery, the nectary, which is abundant in pollen and has a bouquet of beautiful aromas. It's largely because of a viral gene, right? And grapes are, if you look at a wild grape in the wild, it's a terrible thing to consume because it will give you the runs, and in some cases it also is toxic. But there was
Hmm.
a series of viral infections that made the grape, palatable and nice and bunchy, and it ripens at the same time. And the same goes with rice as well. Rice in the wild does not ripen at the same time, right? That's because that's a survival strategy for the
Yep.
grass, right?
Mm.
Now, in the domesticated variety, or the one that we picked up from the wild, it was actually the one in which the grains actually ripen at the same time, and that's because of a viral uh, infection that happened, a series of viral infections that happened, and gave this particular grass this ability to ripen at one time. But otherwise, it would have been so painful going and picking up only a few grains each time from from the
Right.
fronds of the, or sorry, from the spikes or spikelets of these grasses. It just would be too time consuming, and it won't be worth the effort. The energy cost would be just too much for humans to spend. So I think I have story after story on the good that viruses or bacteria or protozoa or everything does. Even worms in our stomach, are actually great. They do an immense service. I mean, for example, if children who don't have worms in their stomachs are the ones who are more prone to Crohn's disease and asthma, right? So now parents are actually making sure that they have some volume of worms, a small population of worms, not something that will congest the intestine, but a small, and of course, frequent deworming to reduce the population is essential. That's sure.
And there are
Yeah, I could
so
go
many
on.
more stories, and Pranay's book is full of them. And he's
Yeah.
writing another book, which is even more interesting. No, no, it's as interesting, I would say, not even more, as interesting and just superb. Really quickly, Pranay, just give us a sneak peek if you're able to what you're working on.
Oh, I'm looking at the history of climate and how climate affected the Indian subcontinent, the history of the Indian subcontinent from the arrival of the Mughals, from about
Babar.
the time of the decline of the Mongol Empire, the Golden Horde, the collapse of the Golden Horde, the problems in Samarkand and Fargana and the Afghan Uzbek area, and how that problem and during the rise of the Little Ice Age forced the Mughals to come into India. And when they arrive into India, of course, Vijayanagara is at its peak, but there are problems there as well. And of course, the Eastern empires have a problem. Gajapati is also not doing too well, but the Khmer collapse is about to happen, and the Khmer Empire in Cambodia, and from there's a bunch of people who leave the border of Thailand and the Khmer Republic, who come to Assam and create
Assam.
the Ahom Empire. So I think I'm looking
Right.
at that, and I in my book at the during the emergency, and I call the emergency the first great um, climate crisis, because 1967 to 1973 or 75 actually were the three big El Ninos and four big La Ninas. And that's when the Bihar famine happens, the food scarcity in Maharashtra happens, and all those things happen. And I don't think we look at 1975 as an environmental problem, because you should look at
Hmm.
Bangladesh crisis
Yes.
also as a climate crisis first, because that's
Right.
what triggered the civil war in the breakup of East Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh. I think it's an environmental story, and I think, as always, I cut my canvas too large, and I feel like Saint Sebastian, that I'm putting myself out each time, and the historians are going to kill me, the climatologists are going to kill me for making all these connections which are not there, which may not be there.
No, so that's exactly why I wanted you to talk about this book,
Yeah.
because earlier in this episode, Prem and I were talking about how we do not have people from different disciplines talking to each other or looking at the same problem from, different points of
Different.
view. And you bring exactly that. You bring different perspectives to a discipline, whether it's geology, geography, climatology, whatever it is. You're looking at it from these different lenses and bringing things together and tying up those loose threads, which makes for a fascinating and a very illuminating story. And so thank you, Pranay, for doing that in all of your books. And I'll toss it over to Prem before we close it out.
No, I mean, while you guys were talking, one of the things that caught my, or at least one of the things that suddenly registered in my head was that each of you grew up to be who you are largely because of your parents. Aarti has talked about how her love for the environment came initially from the nature walks that she used to have with her father. And Pranay, you've written about how your interest in microbes, for instance, grew from the stories that your father told you. And yeah, I suppose, I mean, it's not a fully formed thought, but I was intrigued by the fact that some seeds planted young in the right mind by the right person and what it can grow into. Uh, the one question I have before I sign off as well is, when do we get this book?
Wait, sorry, I missed it. When do I?
When do we get this book?
Well, I have to submit it on 1st of June, so it's another
Okay.
month and 3 days, and it's like a deluge. I'm finding that I just this is the one in which I'm completely out of depth. The virus book was really, I did two podcasts, one with the Bangalore International Center and one with JLF, and basically we ended up transcribing that, and that's how the book came into existence. And we got images, and did the usual rangbazi. But this book is a little more complicated, although the swathe of time is much shorter. It starts from 1450 and ends at 1975. But there's so much politics in this, and there's going to be so much
Mhm.
history that the historians are not going to like me. The political scientists and the economists are not going to like me. Um, People who are East India Company, British Empire baiters are not going to like me. I'm not. I mean, I'm just going to be, candid and saying that this is what the environment was doing. So I'm sorry. I mean, if the famine was happening, it was happening. I mean, there's of course the British should have done something about it, but they didn't. Or Aurangzeb was supposed to do this, or Akbar was supposed to do that, but of course there was no information, and there was no, and see, think about it, that you've got, nobody can predict the evolution or the emergence of locusts, for example, right? Or an arrival of an influenza or a plague, right? Or the disappearance of the river, right? It's just so sudden. I mean, think about Fatehpur Sikri. Of course, that was
Right.
the golden age of the Mughals, and they could absorb that cost, right? But there were several other places. I mean, like the Koringa. Why did Surat, which was like the place, the port where
Mhm.
everybody wanted to come, get inundated, right? And Bombay grew to prominence. So I think those are the kahanis that I want to tell. That that cities did not rise by themselves, because there were environmental factors that actually determined a lot of the economic interests of the colonists.
Well, good luck. And I hope we get this book really fast. Actually, I'm more interested in your notes.
Hmm.
as you write the books, because he reads and he finds out
Yeah.
so much more than what goes into the book, and that stuff is just so interesting. And sitting down with Pranay, I think Pranay, you can mint a lot of money by just selling teas with Pranay, chai with Pranay, or chai time with Pranay, or something like that. Seriously,
I know someone else
it's
who makes a lot of money with chai pay, whatever. But there's
chai pe
somebody else
chacha
who.
times. Yes,
Yeah.
but
But yeah,
great.
not that we
Prem, if,
need, yeah, not
yeah,
that
go
we
ahead.
need an excuse, but before you came on, Pranay, Aarti and I were talking about the fact that all that you know and all the stories you have can't be contained in an episode. So we're going to get you back. And then the book comes out and we'll get you back for that as well.
Oh, Bhagwan.
Yeah, we haven't
Sure,
even
sure.
touched on Indica. There's so much
Yeah.
in Indica that I would like to ask. So we haven't even touched on that. Several episodes, Pranay. And then, of course, Pranay and I are supposed to start talking. Otherwise, Amit Verma will have our heads. So we're going to have to do that too.
I know. I was dreading that. Yeah, absolutely. Post
Right.
post
Yes.
August, pakka. I
Post
should be
August.
done with the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. That works great.
So
Super. So is this a wrap for this one, Prem? Any other
it's a wrap.
questions? Last
Yeah,
thoughts?
it's a wrap.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time, Pranay. I know it's late there and it's a Sunday night with your kids. We'll
Nine,
turn
no
you
worries.
back to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
thanks
teenagers.
so
Yeah.
much for coming on.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much for
So
having
just
me.
one
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
pleasure. No, I was just going to say, just hold on until this thing uploads once we
Okay.
stop the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.